What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Extra Dough. JD here at YonkerCFB on Twitter, as always. Really special show today. Really excited to get into it. We're going to begin our conference preview series. We're going to preview every Power 5 conference. We got a lot of goodies. We're going to talk about a lot of betting information, things to look forward to. We're not going to sit here. I'm not going to bore you with this conference realignment talk and all the BS that's going around. We're going to focus on these teams, what we need to know when we're looking at our handicaps going into the season, what to expect. So I'm really excited to get into it. Big Ten West is where we're going to start today. The first team, and by the way, I'm going in order of finish a year ago, so if you're wondering why I'm going with this team, why is Illinois ahead of Nebraska? Well, that's something Nebraska should have figured out last year. Okay. First up, we have Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes. Their total's only set at 7.5. So we're going to talk about the totals for each and every single one of these teams. It's only 7.5, which seems low considering they did win this division a year ago. You returned 14 starters in total. And let me tell you, this team, I was low on this team a year ago. Despite their success, I was very low on them all year. They were plus 12 in turnovers, and they won a lot of close games. You know, that's usually, turnovers is not a sticky stat. That's something you expect to change from year to year. And as well as close games, you're not always going to win those. So overall, kudos to them for putting themselves in the position to win those close games. They play very good defense. They're very well coached, but you can't necessarily expect all those wins to go their way this year. How you're looking this year? The offense is something that needs to get better. They were downright bad a year ago, and they've gotten bad quarterback play for a couple years in a row now. I think that with Spencer Petras at quarterback, you hear he's locked into a quarterback battle with Alex Padilla, and that was the case last year, and we didn't see the results, but I'd be at least optimistic you're going to see slightly better quarterback play, whoever wins the job. I do think Padilla is making a very strong case as the starter, and he's a little bit more mobile than Petras, and that's something that could open up the offense because you're never going to get an advanced offensive philosophy from this team, but what you're going to get is you want to be able to run the ball effectively and move the chains, even if you're not going to put up points. And that's something they didn't do a year ago. They really struggled, even with Tyler Goodson at running back, they really struggled to move the ball passing or running. They were not good at either, is simply how it goes. So this year, you have Gavin Williams at running back, and I think that the offensive line could support a better running game, a more efficient running game. You lose Tyler Linderbaum at center, but you return pretty much everyone else, and they're going to be very good on that offensive line. I think the wide receiver group is actually pretty underrated. You lose Tyrone Tracy to transfer to Purdue, which in interconference, interdivision, right? That's always tough. And you lose Charlie Jones as well. But, I think the wide receiving room is actually pretty good. They may not get a chance to showcase that, but they're talented guys, even if they don't get a lot of volume. Keegan Williams in particular, and then Arlen Bruce as well are two young guys I have my eye on. So I think offensively they'll take a small step forward. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think they're going to be even better this year. They return 7 of their top 8 defensive linemen from a year ago. So they're going to be very strong on both lines of scrimmage, which is where this team wants to be, right? And then you're going to have solid linebacking core, solid secondary. I think they're going to be top 10 on every unit. So you should expect a top 10 defense, if not top 5. So while this is normally a team I would look to take a step back after their turnover in close game. Again, I don't want to say luck, but their fortune from a year ago. I think this is a team that in your power ranking should be higher than they were last year regardless. You do draw both Ohio State and Michigan out of the East, so the schedule is very tough. Some of the big games like Wisconsin and Michigan you both get at home. And then Iowa State in the non-conference, you have won 6 straight against your rivals. So normally I go the other way on a team like this, which is why I can't totally recommend the over, but I think this team is going to be improved, and they're definitely going to challenge for that divisional title yet again. Because it's Iowa, it's Kirk Ferentz, by now we know what they're going to do, and I think they're going to be really strong at the lines of scrimmage. So overall, I think I would have a slight lean towards the over 7.5. All right. Next up, we have Wisconsin. They are listed at 8.5. They've had a few, I don't know if I want to say down years, but they haven't been quite as proficient as they have been in recent memory, right? And the big concern with this team, you return only 8 starters in total. You have a new offensive coordinator, Bobby Ingram. He was the wide receivers and tight ends coach with the Baltimore Ravens for the last 7 years. But we shouldn't expect their offensive philosophy to change too much, right? We know what they're doing by now. Similar to Iowa, they need better quarterback play. Graham Mertz, he looked like a big change at the position a couple of years ago in game number 1, and he's just been downright bad since that game. Last year, he had 10 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Never want to see more turnovers than touchdowns. And he averaged only 6.9 yards per attempt. So it's going to be a theme you see a lot in this division. Quarterback play just is not stellar. Where the quarterback play isn't stellar, you do have a superstar at running back in Braylon Allen. You see him there featured in the picture. He is, when he runs the ball, you can feel basically an earthquake happening. You expect him to run through walls a la the Juggernaut. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard by now. He was only 17 years old at points last season, and he was still somehow a man amongst boys, even though that doesn't seem like it should make sense. You watch Braylon Allen play football, and it makes sense. He had over 1,200 yards and 6.8 yards per carry. He's going to be a monster. I think this O-line, they're always great, but they haven't been totally at that top-notch level. So you hope to get the O-line back up to speed, which, again, sounds crazy, but for this program, you want it performing at an elite level. You have Ches Malusi, the former Clemson transfer who was injured a year ago, returning as the RB2. They should have a very strong running game. Defensively is where they make their hay. Jim Leonhard is a genius at defensive coordinator. Jim Leonhard, let me tell you guys, some of the NFL schemes, they are looking at what Jim Leonhard's doing at Wisconsin, and they're taking pieces of his defensive philosophy and game plan, and they're using it in their philosophy and game plan. So they were number 1 in the country, allowed only 239 yards per game last year. The issue here is that you return only 3 starters on the defensive side of the ball. So that's where you're going to have your concerns. Only 8 total starters, 3 on the defensive side of the ball. You should, with that excellent defensive coordinator, right, you're not going to slip too far, but I mean, expecting a repeat of last year's 239 yards per game is for sure best case scenario. If you take a look at the schedule here, you do draw Ohio State and Michigan out of the East, which is a very tough draw. And you have Iowa and Nebraska on the road, 2 tough divisional games on the road. So the margins are going to be very razor thin with a difficult schedule. That has me off the Badgers over 8.5, right? Again, there's a few numbers in this conference that look like they might be short, but that's because this is going to be a competitive division. Say what you will about there not being a top team in this division. This is going to be one of the harder fought divisions in all of college football, I believe. And Wisconsin's going to fight hard, but I think it's kind of stacked against them. 9 wins sounds right, maybe 8 or 9 wins. So I wouldn't have a strong take either way. Anytime I see that little production and bad quarterback play and a tough schedule, I'm always going to have to recommend the under, but not a strong lean. As far as looking for bets this season, one thing to circle and stash away for this year, under Paul Chryst, the Badgers are 19-7 as an away favorite. 19-7 as an away favorite, and they're 16-10 against the spread in the non-conference play. So something to look for there. All right, next up, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Under PJ Fleck, this is year 6 of PJ Fleck. They returned 12 starters, and this team, it's one that's kind of been on the cusp a few times. They've had some good years, and right now they're kind of floating around in no man's land. So it's curious, where are they going to go? Are they going to stay up near the top of the division? Are they going to steal the division in a year where it might be kind of up for the taking, or are they going to regress? So my big question with this team is, will the offense get back up to speed? You went from Mike Sanford as your offensive coordinator last year, where things did not look very pretty, and now you go back to Kirk Chiaraka. He was the offensive coordinator here in 2019. What did they do in 2019, you ask? Well, they finished 11-2, and they scored 34 points per game. So you're hoping a return back to Kirk Chiaraka really gets the offense going. I guess you would call it a positive, is he has the same quarterback still playing there. Tanner Morgan had a great year that year and has significantly regressed in the seasons since. Some negatives, while you do have Tanner Morgan, you don't have the two NFL wide receivers he was throwing to back then in Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman. Those guys are both playing on Sundays now. So I don't know, but I think you have some talented wide receivers. Your running back room is undeniably talented, but there are question marks there as well. Mohamed Ibrahim, you see him pictured here, one of the better running backs in all of college football, but he's coming off a busted Achilles, and that's never something easy to come back from. You had three guys in the running back room transfer out. You had Marquise Irving transferred to Oregon. You had Cam Wiley transferred to Akron, and you had Kai Thomas transferred to Kansas, and all three of those guys might see run this year. So three big transfers out. And then who you have behind Mohamed Ibrahim, one of the main names is Trey Potts, who stepped up a year ago, but he was injured to the point that he was hospitalized for a number of days, and it was pretty serious. So both him and Ibrahim were out for the spring. They're expected to be back for the fall, but major question backs there. Question marks, right, on is Tanner Morgan returning to form? Question marks basically everywhere. So overall with this team, I think I have a little too many questions to fully be bought in on the Gophers. I would love to be, given that I don't feel super confident about Wisconsin or Iowa as the favorites this year. But you're going to be rebuilding on both lines of scrimmage. That's where you were really good last year. That's where you made your hay, and now you're rebuilding there. Overall, I think the offense should be improved. Defense will stay solid. You'll be competitive. But not a team I'm willing to throw my hat in for. So looking at the schedule, you have road games against Michigan State, road game against Penn State, road game against Nebraska, road game against Wisconsin. Their total set at 7.5 wins. Given the difficulty of that schedule, I still think they get to 8. You managed 9 a year ago despite the passing offense completely falling apart. And like I said, it's going to be a hard-fought game. At this point, I'm more inclined to trust PJ Fleck, and I do think the offense will get better. So I think there's 6 games that you should win on the schedule is what I see. You only have to find 2 more there. And so I think they do find a way over, but not super confident. As far as betting, what to look for here, as an away favorite under PJ Fleck, they are 6-2-1 against the spread. So looking for away favorite spots for the Golden Gophers. All right, next up you have the Purdue Boilermakers under Jeff Brom. This is year 6 for him here. You have 14 returning starters, and last year you won 9 games for the first time since 2003. Obviously capitalized by that bowl game victory over Tennessee in thrilling fashion. So overall, I like what this team does offensively. Your passing offense is routinely near the top of the conference and really among the top in the country with Aiden O'Connell returning at quarterback along with Jeff Brom. I really like them to maintain that dangerous passing attack. This will be O'Connell's 6th year on campus, and Jack Plummer is off to Cal. The two split duties to begin the year, and O'Connell really came on extremely strong towards the end of the year. So with him being the unquestioned starter in his 6th year on campus, I think Aiden O'Connell is going to be due for a huge year. Like I said, passing offense is huge in this scheme, and I do have question marks at the wide receiver position. They lose David Bell to the NFL. You have Milton Wright. He was supposed to step up and be the number 1 guy, but he's going to be out for the year due to academic reasons. And then you also lose Jackson Anthrop. So you essentially lose your top 3 wide receivers for a year ago. And it's always been a position crucial to the success of this team. If you'll remember, Rondale Moore and David Bell both going crazy, right? That's when they're pulling their upset. So I'm going to look for Tyrone Tracy to step up. Mentioned his name earlier in the Iowa preview. They said Tracy should be working out of the backfield and in the slot. I see him taking that Rondale Moore role. I'm not saying he's as good as Rondale Moore, but I see a big year for him. But I have questions outside of that. You have Brock Thompson assumed to be the top outside guy, but he's dealt with a ton of injuries. He was dealing with injuries last year until he had that huge bowl game against Tennessee, and now he's dealing with more injuries. I believe he had surgery this offseason. Don't quote me on that, but a lot of question marks going on with Brock Thompson. I think Payne Durham's going to be a great tight end in general. So On the defensive side of the ball, I have question marks there for sure as well. You lose George Karlaftis, and I don't think he's going to be easy to replace. He had a fantastic defense a year ago, one of the more underrated units in the country, allowed only 22 points per game. I think you're going to retain a decent secondary, but they're for sure not going to improve upon their numbers a year ago. I'd look for them to take a step back there. So overall, I just don't see them breaking through this year. It's a team that I usually will look to target as the underdog and sometimes stay away from as the favorite because they can win or lose any game on their schedule. They can, right? With a passing offense that good, they can go out there and beat anyone. But with so many question marks and just like the running game hasn't been there, defensively, the front seven on the defense, I think is going to take a step back this year. I have question marks. So if you're looking at the schedule, they open with Penn State, which is a huge opener. And the next two games you should be able to win. So if they can pull off an upset week 1, and somehow begin the year 3-0, right? Then I'm looking at their last 3 games of this season are also winnable. So you could potentially you should start 3-1, I believe, and then you could finish 3-0. So if you go 7-1 over that stretch, you only need to win one more game to go over your 7.5 total. But like I said, I just don't have confidence they're going to beat Penn State week 1. I would take Penn State there. You could still get to 6 wins. There are 6 very winnable games on the schedule. You need to find a couple more, right? But the 7.5 to go over that, you need 8. So I'm not too confident in that one at all. It's not a team I want to take the under on because I believe in Jeff Brom, so I can't really in good faith do that. But definitely keeps me off the over 7.5. As far as betting there. What I'm looking to do here is betting them as an away dog. Like I said, they're good. They can win any game. They're 9-3 against the spread as an away dog under Brom, and they're also 8-5 as a home dog under Brom. So definitely a team I'm looking at as a hungry dog. All right, Illinois. Brett Bielema begins year 2 in Champaign. They returned 13 starters. They went 5-7 a year ago. The offense turns to Barry Looney as the offensive coordinator. He comes there from UTSA, where they had a huge season a year ago, and they shouldn't really change too much of the offensive philosophy. He previously worked with Bielema as the tight ends coach at Arkansas, and of course UTSA played Illinois last year, so Bielema must have liked what he saw. I think the passing game is going to be very bad. Again this year, stop me if you've heard that before in this conference, but you turn to Tommy DeVito at quarterback, and it's hard to be worse than the options Illinois had last year, and then they struggled with injuries as well, right? We saw that even in the very first game of the season where they turned to Arthur Sikowski at quarterback after an injury to Brandon Peters. So I think Tommy DeVito, it's hard to be worse than what they've had. I know that sounds harsh. He played a number of years at Syracuse, right? Was never quite a solid answer at the position, but he can throw the ball better than some of their previous options. And you have Isaiah Williams, who's going to be the go-to guy at wide receiver. And while I am a huge Isaiah Williams fan, the fact that he's the number 1 weapon on the offense by far, right, as far as receiving goes, and he's a converted quarterback, that tells you about all you need to know. So they won't be dynamic. They're going to run the ball a lot, similar to a lot of teams in this division. The good news is you have 2 good running backs. You have Chase Brown and then Josh McCray. Chase Brown's off a 1,000-yard season. He's probably going to have another one. And Josh McCray, man, he was a beast as a freshman, a big back who, if he gets going, he's tough to bring down. So they're going to have a great run game. The offensive line is something that in the Bielema system, you really need to be on point, right? You're looking at bully people. He's trying to replicate what he did at Wisconsin, and that requires an offensive line who can bully people. And quite frankly, I don't think the offensive line is there yet. You return only 2 starters. Bielema did provide some confidence when he said it's one of their most improved positions on the team, but I just don't see him fully being able to implement the bully ball other than on some weaker, less dynamic teams. As far as defensively, last year they were way better than anticipated. I thought defensive coordinator Ryan Walters did one of the better jobs in college football. That it's not really a name you hear a lot, but they allowed only 21.9 points per game overall, and in Big Ten play they allowed only 18.8 points per game. And for a team in Illinois we thought was going to be overmatched in year one of the Brett Bielema hire, and I remember, kind of trashing the hire at first, I thought they performed a lot better than you would expect. They were only negative 30 yards per game in Big Ten play. And that may not sound great, but considering the year before that, they were negative 117 yards per game, right? That's a jump of almost 90 yards per game better. And with that defense taking a step forward, 6 starters back, you return 5 of your top 7 tacklers. I think this team is not an easy out whatsoever. Still at a talent disadvantage, and still the offensive line is not quite where I want to be. So I'm not really going full in on this team, but I think they're going to be competitive. There's a reason that half these teams' win totals in this conference are set at 7.5, because there's not a lot separating them. So I guess Illinois, if I was forced to choose, I'd play the over, but the schedule wasn't really popping out to me. So I'm not looking to target them preseason. One thing I am looking to target is that betting-wise, they were undervalued in conference play. They went 7-2 against the spread last year in the Big Ten, and they went 4-1 as an away dog. So looking to target them as an away dog in conference play this season. All right, next up we have the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So this is year 5 of Scott Frost. They went only 15-29 so far under Frost. 15-29 record is what he has to show. So he's got to show something eventually here. How's it looking this year? Well, it looks okay, but it doesn't look great. So they returned 12 starters to a team that went just 3-9 a year ago. They have famously been called by some people the best 3-9 team ever. And while that sounds ridiculous, I somewhat agree. They're in the running. I don't know how many other 3-9 teams I can think of off the top of my head to mention them against, but for sure on that level. The crazy thing in the Scott Frost era, they are 5-20 in one-score games. 5 wins, 20 losses in one-score games. Now, normally, as a gambler, that's something you would expect to change from year to year. And overall, I think that's how you should approach things from a gambling perspective. But with Scott Frost, it's a coaching thing. They have too many penalties. They've been terrible on special teams. Of course, you're going to lose one-score games when that's the case. One reason for optimism there is you finally have a new special teams coach in Bill Bush, and they have ranked outside the top 100 in pretty much any special teams metrics you can look at for the last 3 years. And they were one of the worst nationally there a year ago. It was just absolutely brutal a year ago. One of the worst teams in the entire country on special teams. So you would expect them to take a step forward there, and that's all positive news. You have Casey Thompson transferring in at quarterback from Texas. Should be an upgrade. You have 3 good running backs in Anthony Grant, one of the better JUCO transfers in college football. You have Gabe Ervin, who was a talented freshman a year ago. And then Ramir Johnson also played well. So there's some positives on the offense. You're going to need wide receivers to step up. But I think Trey Palmer in the slot is one option to do that. And then the big news is that you get Mark Whipple as offensive coordinator. So they're going to run more tempo, like he did at Pitt last season, right? You saw Pitt have one of the best offenses in the country. Jordan Addison won the Biletnikoff, and Kenny Pickett was selected highly in the NFL draft, which seemed crazy going into the year. So overall, I think I'm looking to capitalize on this team on the overs, hopefully early on in the year. They had a great defense a year ago. I thought they were one of the better defenses in the country that just didn't get enough recognition. But they're a little inexperienced up front this year. And then the secondary is also a little bit of a question mark. So while I'm not saying they're going to be bad on that side of the ball, I think they're going to take a slight step back, and then the offense is going to take a step forward. So I'm targeting the overs this year with Mark Whipple as the offensive coordinator. As far as the team total goes, 7.5. Again, I can only look at the over, given that they were 3-9 a year ago and they played way better, and then you see the improvements on the special teams that should be there. The only way I could look is at the over, but I don't trust Frost enough to do that personally, but I would recommend the over. All right, last but not least, we have the Northwestern Wildcats. Their win total is set at 4.5 this season. Last year, they fell from 7-2 to just 3-9. They finished 3-9 a year ago. But that was to be expected. They lost so much. They had almost no returning production last year. If you will recall, think back to their first game of the season, they were favored against Michigan State. And I remember here on Paid for Play, part of the Daily Bread Media universe, I remember just saying, why on earth is Northwestern favored against Michigan State? Does no one realize Northwestern's going to suck this year? And of course, I didn't know Michigan State was going to have a breakout year, but I still thought they were a little underrated. And then lo and behold, look where Michigan State finished the season and look where Northwestern finished the season. Quite crazy. So all that being said, usually you have a bounce back year under Coach Fitzgerald, right? He's been pretty steady. He's been there a long time. And so normally you'd expect a bounce back this year. And I would expect a bounce back given that they returned more than they did a year ago. My concern is that they were negative 150 yards per game in Big Ten play. They were downright dreadful. They weren't just bad. They were a stepping stone. They were terrible. And so even though I do expect a bounce back, it's a bounce back to what? Are they going to be negative 100 yards per game differential, negative 80, right, somewhere in there, negative 50 at best? I think they're rightfully picked at the bottom of this conference again. Now, overall, you return 14 starters, and you do return 9 starters offensively. Quarterback's still a huge question mark, and there's not really any players of note. I'm looking to step up this year, so the passing game will struggle because, right, not great wide receiver play as well. But you have an extremely strong running back room. It's going to be the identity of this team. You have Evan Hull returning after stepping up a year ago. And then Cam Porter had a big freshman year and then was lost to injury last year in return. So you have a fantastic 1-2 combination. And you have an offensive line that returns 110 career starts. Coach Fitzgerald said it could be the best offensive line he's had in 17 seasons coaching in Evanston. So that being said, they're going to run the hell out of the ball. I think they're going to do it decently well. I wish they had a more dynamic offense, but they don't. So that means I'm going to target some unders because they're going to run the ball. They're going to keep the clock moving. I think they're going to do that more effectively than they did last year. They cannot afford to get into shootouts because they know that they will lose. Defensively, I still think they have a decent secondary, even though Brandon Joseph transferred to Notre Dame. And overall, they weren't great there a year ago, but I think their style of play is going to set up to unders. They're going to be listed, right? A lot of them are going to be in the 40s, but if I see one that fits, that's what I'm going to be looking to hit. And I think they're going to be competitive this year despite not being good. The schedule doesn't stick out as anything that would make me want to play the over 4.5, even though, again, that's the only way I could look with Fitzgerald primed for a bounce back. Of course, you get the non-conference game against Duke. That's a big one, But yeah, there's just some games you would have to win, and they'd still have to pull some upsets. So overall, just too much. I cannot put my confidence in them. I'm mainly looking to target the unders, and then them as an underdog in the right spot. All right, guys, that's it. Episode extra dough, episode 9, Big Ten West preview. We're going to be back previewing the Big Ten East next week, previewing all the conferences after that. We're not always going to break them into 2 videos here. It's only if there's divisions, right? There's some, like the Big 12, we'll just hit in one video. So other than that, thank you for listening. Daily Bread Media, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, some of my other work, I'm going to shout it out here. I don't always do that. DevyWatch, DevyWatch.com. I do the college fantasy football for DevyWatch. Been previewing all the conferences, every single player. I just did like a 16,000 word write-up on the SEC. So if you play college fantasy football, if you're interested in playing college fantasy football, if you're interested in Devy, which is, right, you draft teams, your players for college. It's basically like dynasty football for the NFL, except you're drafting a lot of players in college. So you're getting in on them before they even hit the NFL draft. Check out Devy Watch. Check out Fantasy Points. That's where my college football content for betting props this year is going to be found at Fantasy Points. Check them out, fantasypoints.com. They have great NFL work and PGA work as well, and they're opening up the college football package. You guys are going to want to get in on. It's a comprehensive package for betting. It's got props, and then we also have our DFS previews as well. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be contributing to this season. Of course, once the season rolls around, we're getting close. We have paid for play coming up on Saturday mornings to preview each week's slate of games. So other than that, thank you for listening and have a good one.